Hello, welcome to the platform update for May 2022. So normally we cover these as part of the Lab Developer Workshop, but as a lot of you will be aware, we didn't have a Lab Developer Workshop in May because we had our launch event. And hopefully a lot of you attended and had a great time. For those that don't know me, my name is Paul Gregory. I'm a solutions engineer here at Skillable, and I'd just like to walk you through the updates we released for both LOD and the TMS platform at the end of May. So this being right at the beginning of June, everything I'm going to show you is in production, and I'm actually going to show you it from a production perspective today. Okay. So we'll start off with looking at the updates, which are sort of a little bit outside of LOD and TMS, in the fact that one of the things we've been talking about quite a bit is something called Skillable Connect. So in reality, we're sort of talking about this a little bit as a product, but it's not really a product. It's just really a refactoring of some of our documentation. So there's no new features, there's no changes to the way anything works, just in case anybody's got any concerns. But Skillable Connect effectively is a reimagining of the way we document our APIs, both for LOD and for TMS. So before, our documentation for our API was just effectively long text, really difficult to work out what you needed to do. There was no organization. You sort of had to sort of work it out all for yourself and so on. And it was a bit unclear. So there is now a standard for actually documenting APIs called the Open API, and it's now compliant with that standard. So it provides a far more sort of logical structure. It's easier to search, much easier to understand how to consume API information. So much easier. Today, it's not all the features are not there. You will see this evolve over the next 2 to 3 months. For example, we're going to actually put in the ability to actually test the API straight from the web page. So if you've got an API key, you'll be able to enter your API key on the web page, complete an example command, and it will show you the results that you will get back. So before, we've sort of normally got people to use tools like Postman to do that. And of course you can still use tools like Postman, but you'll be able to run API commands directly from the web page in another couple of months. So the website's connect.skillable.com. It's a very simple, very straightforward web page. Here happens to be the LOD edition. Straight from the LOD edition, there is a link for the TMS API, but it's pretty straightforward. Connect.skillable.com, whack LOD or whack TMS. And then the idea is you can sort of jump down into the particular section or use the search box or just read the API information. So, chances are if you've worked with our API, you're familiar with the launch command. So pretty straightforward, just give you the sample of what the command would look like. So just /launch on the end of the URL. Okay, and then we actually sort of break down the parameters that you can specify, what are required, and effectively everything else that is optional. And we then also break down the responses, so you can actually look at what the response looks like, and we break down what all the response fields are. And one of the things you'll notice is for some objects there will be like a little expansion box on the right hand side of the parameter if it returns an array of values. So one of the great ones for that is the details API call. So if I look at the response, there's actually lots of sections where we actually expand the data associated with that around activities. So we do hopefully have some expanding sections. So here, for example, is the snapshots one, which will then show you what you would expect to find in the snapshots section. Okay, so hopefully if you've not seen that, we've been talking about this quite a lot. This big improvement on the way we format and manage our documentation for our API. And again, just to repeat, there are no actual functional changes to the API or anything along those lines. It's just purely a reimagination of the documentation. And we're going to enable some additional features and capabilities in there as we go along. As of May the 26th, we actually did an update for the LOD platform. So as I've mentioned, these are in production today, and we made a few new feature releases as part of LOD. And you will see actually over the summer quite a significant number of features are going to be released. So what did we actually change in terms of the core features? So the first thing, we're starting to look at bring your own cloud more and more. We've talked about this in the cloud workshop in April, and we talked about the fact that we have native first-class integration for AWS and Azure. And if you attended launch, you would have noticed in launch we announced that actually over the next 2 to 3 months we will have first-class support for Google GCP as well. But we also are going to actually make it much easier for people to be able to onboard their own cloud platforms as well. So bring your own cloud scenario. So imagine something like a Salesforce or a Workday and being able to onboard that platform and deliver training from it. Now, one of the things that was sort of missing from our platform was if you need to configure features in a bring your own cloud scenario, you might not know what all the pieces of information you need to present to the user as part of the URL until you've actually provisioned that particular resource. So think about provisioning resources in Azure, AWS, EC2, GCP, where you might need to wait till you get the public IP address back or the fully qualified domain name before you can connect to it. Okay, and then you want to publish that to the user so they can connect to those objects. Well, one of the features we had or didn't have in our platform was if you defined any user-defined variables, you couldn't use those on the custom client landing page. So that's now been resolved. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. The other thing, if you joined us for our February Lab Developer Workshop, we talked about containers, and we feel containers are going to be a big technology moving forwards because they're really going to enable nano and micro learning styles for some applications and some services, because they start so fast, you can have a small bit of educational environment and then straight into a lab, small bit of education straight into a lab type experience, because often one of the reasons labs are 60 minutes, 90 minutes, even longer potentially, is sometimes just because of how long the labs start to take. If you've got to wait 3 minutes for a lab to start or 4 minutes for a lab to start, then actually you want that time to be rewarded with a substantial lab. So this is the web display feature has been enhanced to enable us to support a much greater number of applications, and we can have a look at that. So let's look at this client landing page capability to start with, and let me find the right version of my browser. Okay, so and that's the wrong one. Let's just go and find the other one. Just bear with me for a second. Here we go. So here's just a page which is going to connect me out to Cisco Umbrella, so a cloud-based management or monitoring platform for network devices and so on. Okay, and I've just set up a bit of a fictitious scenario here. I don't technically need to do this here, but you'd get the idea. So if I edit the profile, I've actually got on the cloud page, I've got the override client landing page, and I'm using a custom landing page. So notice I've actually got a variable in here, okay, and it's actually a custom variable that I've defined. Okay, so what I've now got is a lifecycle action. Okay, now all this is actually doing is taking that piece of data and storing it in the variable. So I don't really need to do this, but just imagine this script is maybe provisioning something in a bring your own cloud, and then you're getting something returned from that platform, which now says, right, here's the URL you need to connect to. This is the user URL. Okay, and then being able to publish that into the cloud tab. Okay, so if I just actually come out of here, okay, and I hit launch, okay, it's going to take a couple of minutes to launch because this does happen to have a couple of virtual machines behind it as well. But the key thing we want to remember is, what did that custom client landing page look like? Okay, so it was encode filters equals and then @lab.variable URL. So what we're expecting to see is that @lab variable to be replaced with that other string of text. Okay, so this content here. So this wouldn't have worked before main. Okay, so that's what we're expecting. So just to say, imagine that we're provisioning something dynamically in the cloud, and then we're returning that custom URL or whatever it's going to be, maybe a token that the user's going to need to actually be able to connect to. So we're going to see this As soon as it gives me the button to actually sort of see the lab immediately, we'll jump in there and we'll just see we're going to have that custom link in the instructions. Okay, so I'm not worried about the virtual machines being up and running, so you're not going to worry about that. So if I come across to the resources, you can actually see I've got that rest of that string in here now, and if I just click on the link, it takes me across straight to the sign-in page for that particular portal. Okay, so hopefully reasonably straightforward. Okay, so we're just wanting to sort of highlight that capability. So we think that's going to be sort of something that's going to be quite important over the coming months as people start to bring more and more of their own clouds to us. If we go back to the containers, which was the other browser window, which I did have there, okay, and we look at the containers. So I've got a container here and I've got the associated lab profile with it, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Okay, key thing with the container, we've made a couple of changes in the configuration. So what have we changed? So the first thing we've changed is actually you can now specify user credentials. So this allows you to specify a particular set of credentials or username that you might want to authenticate against. So that can actually improve container access where they've got restricted access and you need to be able to log in as root, for example. Before, we used to have this ability for what command did you want to run. Okay, we never had this entry point, so this entry point's new. So the usefulness here is when you was working with containers before, if you set them up for web display, you then couldn't get a command prompt. You couldn't get a bash prompt or whatever. So that actually meant you was always flicking between web display and terminal display, which was a bit of a pain in the backside when you needed to get in and check the configuration or just try and change the configuration. So now we actually allow you to do both. You can have web display and you can connect in to a shell as well. The system will allow you to do that. The command section is pretty similar, so you can specify the command that you want to run and you can specify whatever environment variables you might need to set to customize that experience. Exposed ports and web displays the same, but two important changes here. Okay, start path and relative links. Okay, so start path is really important for technologies like Jupyter. So what we used to do before was when we used to connect using sort of HTTPS, we used to actually connect to basically just to the exposed port. Whatever that port was, we would connect to it. Now the problem with products like Jupyter is they don't put their website on that port or on that URL. They bury it somewhere else in the structure. Okay, so first and foremost, we can now specify where that URL is going to be. Okay, so that's a big improvement and allows us to really support technologies like Jupyter really, really well. The second element is actually the relative links. The relative links are where you might have links in the web content and those links contain or are relative rather than fully qualified. So just imagine, for example, your URL for your website is mywebsite.com. Okay, we connect in and on that page it says, go and load this file from /images/ whatever the file name is. Okay, it works fine when you look at it normally, but when you looked at it through our container web display engine, you'd get like the box display where you can't load a graphic. Okay, so by using relative links, because that website actually has relative URLs in it rather than fully qualified ones, it would still allow us to load the pages correctly. And we actually had that problem because of the way the proxy was working, so that sort of fixes all of those proxy type issues. So the options you would need will actually vary depending on the particular lab experience that you're after, but it now enables us to almost support applications in containers as fabric. And one of the things you will be seeing from our template gallery team is they're going to start posting container templates for Grafana, for Jupyter and for other products, which you can then just go and add your lab content into. So it's going to make it a much better experience. So if I were just to go and launch this, so if I just press the launch button, we'll actually see the container start in that sort of 5-6 seconds as normal. Okay, this is going to connect me out so we can see Grafana is just loading, and I can just go and add in the credentials. Hopefully I can remember what the password is, and it signs me in, and I can then start doing whatever the lab objectives are. So this just wouldn't work before because of the way that the sort of URL was constructed and things, and the way it would work with respect to our proxy and that we was using before. So it's been some awesome work by our development team, and they've actually made this experience much better. Cannot thank them enough. And actually they've turned this around in about 6 weeks. So some amazing amount of work here to actually get this working just as we want it to. So we're really happy, really chuffed about this feature, this capability. So let me just end that. Oops. Obviously the idea is to hit end. Not edit instructions. Cool. Let's find some slides. So that brings us to the end of the features that were released in LOD. Deployment was May the 26th. So everything I've shown you is from the live environment. It's available there now for you to get access to. Looking at updates with respect to the TMS. So the TMS updates were pushed out at the end of May the 31st, to actually update the platform, looking at some reporting changes and just a couple of sort of improved usability changes. So just to make sort of some lives a little bit easier for operations managers and so on. So not dramatic changes in the platform for May. So one of the things that you might remember from the April Lab Developer Workshop was we mentioned about some changes to the user experience around, we now put these new icons in so users can actually see what courses are new with a little sunburst, what stuff they've completed with the green tick, what stuff's in progress with the sort of semicircular sort of arrow, and of course the button language changed for in progress to continue. Okay, and we also then had that status filter for what's not started, what's in progress. So one of the things that we did do was made a change around that, which actually added that feature and capability for people that are just browsing the course catalog as well. So really simple. We just didn't have that filter box for people that were reviewing the course catalog. So if I go and find my my browser that's got the course catalog in it, it's this one. Okay, so here I'm just in as an operations manager effectively, and we've just really added that filter in here. Okay, so pretty straightforward in terms of adding that filter. So that's really just, we've just taken that little bit further. So people ask for that on the course catalogue for people like operations managers and so on. Other things we've also done is, first of all, if you work in an environment where you've got lots of organisations, so maybe you've got partner companies, or actually you divide your organisation structure up quite granularly. One of the problems we had, and this is something that maybe affects Skillable more than it affects anybody else, was when organisations got disabled, okay, they were still in the list. You could still see them. Okay, so it just made the list unmanageable, really long, really messy. So we just a small update that if an organisation is disabled, when you're looking at the browse lists, the organisation is no longer displayed. Okay, so that just makes the list a bit shorter, a bit easier to manage. So maybe more important for us than the majority of customers. But obviously, just in case you have got a few organisations and some of them are disabled, when you use those dialog boxes, you might notice they have disappeared now. Minor update, just to help people with contract instructors. So this is more to do with the contract instructor themselves, so they actually understand what a contractor instructor is. So it's really help around the assistance around help documentation and so on. A couple of improvements around course assignment. Just again, the form, we've just added an extra field to the form just to make life a little bit easier for people that are actually manually assigning courses. And we've got new defaults when you're actually creating courses as well. So there was something that was always set to a particular value, you couldn't do anything about it, and we've just now allowed organisations to set new defaults. So really sort of minor changes. So if we just jump across back into the TMS, if I look at instructor account here, okay, so operations managers could do this if they're creating instructors as well as instructors themselves. If I edit my account, or I'm in as an operations manager actually, if I go to the instructor information, one of the things is I can do is I could define myself as a contract instructor. Okay, obviously a lot of people didn't necessarily know what that meant. What was the elements of that, and so we basically put this link in. That's all. Okay, so it's not the most exciting of additional piece of information, which just fires you out to some documentation. If you're unaware, a contract instructor is effectively an instructor that gets defined that can make themselves available to multiple organisations. So this can often be very important for instructors that teach vendor-based courseware. So if I put my hat on, before I was at Skillable, I was a Microsoft instructor. Now I did actually happen to work for an education partner, but I could have been independent. And at that point I could have sort of come to Skillable and said, I'm a Microsoft instructor, can you register me on your system and set me up as a contractor? And then effectively, if any companies that I was working for used Skillable Labs for delivering Microsoft courses, they could add me without having to create a specific account for me and so on. So that was the idea. So it just allowed them to understand what a contract instructor is, the implications of that as well. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward there. If I go to the administration, if we look at course assignments, if I hit create course assignments, okay, the key thing here is we've just added an expired field. Okay, so when was this assignment expire? So when have they got to complete it from? So pretty simple, pretty straightforward field there. So fairly simple. And the last thing that we've actually added is new defaults for organisations when it comes to courses. So if I go and hit create course, okay, one of the things that happens when you create a course is it always fills the duration into 5 days and the training to 5 days. And this is a bit of a legacy hangover in terms of originally how the TMS was used, who was using it, the sorts of things they were using it for. Okay, and these weren't really manageable other than you could come in here and just make sure you change them every time. So what we've now done is we've now actually configured it that if you wanted to set those to a particular default value, you absolutely can. So if I come down and sort of come to my organisations, and for example if I go to Career Rocket, okay, if I edit the organisation, okay, in the organisation page, just refresh there we go. If I come to the preferences, got quite a few sections, and if we go to the course section, so we'll just get to there eventually. So class settings, course settings, you can now see that I've got a default duration field and a default training days field. So effectively I can set those to whatever value that I want, and they will then be the default values that will get picked up when you hit create course. Okay, so you will see those boxes are blank by default because we're sort of inheriting the system-wide default, which is the 5 days. But if you then wanted to change that and have a particular default, so for example, if every course you create a 1-day course, you could come in here and that just means they don't need to be edited under most normal circumstances. So hopefully pretty simple, pretty straightforward there in terms of those changes. The last thing which I can't actually show you because ultimately if it was enabled, which it is enabled, it would be disabled, so you wouldn't be able to see it. But if I go and do something like find classes, okay, and I will then turn around and say belongs to organisation, okay, this box here would no longer show organisations that are disabled. So if I had any that are disabled, they just wouldn't be in the list. Okay, so that's really all that is. So pretty straightforward. So that's what that other feature's about. So as I said, actually this has already been deployed. So all these features, again, I've been showing you against the live TMS platform. So everything in there you should be able to see, you should be able to go and have a look at today if you wanted to go and do that. I was using our Career Rocket demonstration site, which is a live production environment. So again, obviously all those settings being picked up. As always, we'd love you to stay in contact with us. Use Slack, great way to actually just ask questions, both peer support and to get responses from Skillable as well as obviously using our social media. We often put a lot of stuff out on social media, and we like to talk about our customers on social media, especially their achievements and things. I'm sure you've seen quite a lot of those sort of things. I did mention obviously the new Skillable Connect. Okay, but one of the things I would like to really sort of emphasize is we're also now showing our Skillable roadmap. So skillable.com WAC roadmap. So please go and have a look at that. You can see what's coming. And actually, if there's stuff there that's really of interest to you and you'd like to maybe add some content in terms of, oh, I'd love it if it did this as well, or it did that as well, please actually put that into our feedback site. Everything you see on there will also be in our feedback site. Okay, so if customers have got a specific way they'd like something we're working on to have a certain capability or make sure it's got a certain feature, we only know that if you come and tell us. So we would love you to go to the feedback site and actually tell us about that. I know in the past, if we go back 3/4 of a year ago even, people would say actually nothing really happened from the feedback stuff. We now have an active team working on the feedback information. So anything, even like for myself, if I want to generate an idea, I have to put it through the feedback process. So we use that site internally as well as for our customer feedback. And obviously customer ideas will generally have greater priority than internal ideas. So if our customers want it, then that's obviously more important to us in most circumstances. So as I say, please, if you've got no ideas, go and have a look, see what other customers are asking for, and it might all of a sudden you might go, oh yeah, that would be brilliant, but it would also be good if it did this as well. So you can upvote, you can add your own additions to ideas as well as create new ones. We'd love you to get involved because we want to make the platform you want it to be. So thank you very much. So hopefully this has been a useful product update for you around the changes that we've been making. Next Lab Developer Workshop will be back to the normal format, product update followed by the actual Lab Developer Workshop, and we'll be continuing our Summer of Cloud. And the July Lab Developer Workshop is looking at Azure Cloud Slice based labs. So thank you very much. I'm Paul Gregory. Hope to speak to you soon.